Welcome to another episode of the Lone Recruiter Podcast. I'm your host, Brett Clemenson, and today we are joined by Matt Hart. How are we going?
Really well, thanks, mate.
Is it Matt or Matthew?
Either or.
Either or. Fair enough. I wanted to bring you in today because you've just opened up your own agency, so congratulations.
Thank you.
And I reckon there's a bunch of people listening to this thinking, I want to open up an agency at some point, because who doesn't think that? So I thought we'd just pick your brains about how it went and see what comes out.
Sounds good.
Firstly, I was looking at your LinkedIn, 18,000 followers, and I was impressed. I was really impressed. Is there any secrets to how you got that?
Look, I think it's just consistency with adding your connections and accepting your connections and getting content out on LinkedIn. I think it's something that you do each day, each week, rather than, once a quarter or once a year, obviously. And if you're consistent, you build.
Do you connect with every single person you speak to?
Yes, generally.
Religiously? Yeah, interesting.
Not all of them, except.
Well, apparently a lot do, so there you go. Look, okay, going out on your own, what is it? You pretty much went out this year, right? So maybe 3 months ago now, is that right? What's been, you reckon, the biggest challenge?
The biggest challenge would be wearing the other hats that I wasn't wearing, as a billing manager in my prior role. So, wearing the admin, operational, invoice, those sorts of hats. Challenging. And, enjoying that upskilling. I'm lucky I've got a good team around me, and, my wife, whose title is Head of Good Vibes, Brackets and Accounts, she's been great with, all of the invoicing and those sorts of things. But, I think just wearing the extra hats in the role, that's been a challenge.
Definitely. I mean, it becomes another job, right?
Correct, yeah. And, you obviously, when you're starting, the key is billing. And getting money through the door. And, that takes time, regardless of, how long you've been in the industry, how good you are, building that pipeline up again, it takes time. And that's 95% of your time, and then finding the time for the other bits and pieces, it makes for long days. And then you've got, your time with your kids that you want to put in each day too. Yes. So I think just navigating all of that, balancing it, but I'm enjoying it.
Cool.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. And that's, you say 95% of your time's billing. It's not like 5%'s left for the admin. It's like another then 45% on top of that, right?
That's it, yeah. And that's just your work day.
Yes, exactly. I guess flip it on the other way. What was easier than you thought would be?
Yeah, it wasn't necessarily easier, but pleasantly surprising was some timing lining up really nicely with who I wanted to be in business with. I had some thoughts about, if I was to do this, who would be the ideal team members to have with me. And I was really pleasantly surprised that, firstly, those that have joined me wanted to, and that it just so happened that it was a really good time for them as well. And it was actually part of the reason we came up with the name Recrevi.
Tell me more.
So it means in Latin to grow again. And so for me, after 7 years, the one agency, it was time, for that next growth point. And this was my growth move. Similarly, for Erica and Francesca and for Matt, they were looking for their next growth move. And so I wouldn't say that it was necessarily easier, but pleasantly surprising that sort of it lined up that way.
No, I love it. it. And obviously you mentioned here you're in your last job for 6-7 years. How did you navigate the non-compete?
Yeah, it's firstly respected it. That was a big thing. But I sought advice from an expert in the field. So, a lawyer who's arguably the best in this space in Australia, a partner who gave some really solid advice. And, you know, once I was comfortable with, hey, we're not doing anything to firstly ruffle feathers, you know, go against that non-compete. I was comfortable with setting the timelines around launch and how we go about that.
And did they give you any solid advice that you might be able to share today? Like, was there any pieces that you go, yeah, that was actually pretty good?
Yeah, so, I mean, firstly, you just always want to seek advice from a legal professional, and it comes down to your individual contract and the situation. But I think some big takeaways are that there are no contracts that lock you in such that you're never able to start your own business in the area that you're a specialist. And if you are respectful, you know, of sort of geographical limitations, if you're respectful of, you know, prior client base, if you do the respectful thing and, you know, respect the non-compete, then at a point in time, and it's not that long generally, you are legally able to start your own business within that space.
Did your non-compete that was in your contract differ to what the lawyer was telling you need to do, or did it kind of line up?
To be honest, she said that I was doing the classy thing, actually giving it that much time, because I did give it a little bit of extra time. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, cool.
Yeah. And I guess the other sort of big things, the biggest thing that lawyers are wary of is breaching confidentiality. You know, that's something that you just never breach, and there's no real timeline on that. You know, it's not like after 6 months you can breach confidentiality. So that's the big thing. Yeah.
Okay. And look, we're here now. You've got your business. Have you got a defined sort of like goal for year one? Do you know what you want to achieve this year? Not even necessarily financially, but just like, have you got an idea in your mind of what that looks like?
Yeah, I do. You know, financially, from team size, you know, numbers, you know, and what that group looks like in terms of the levels of seniority. I've also got, you know, in mind the clients that I want to be working with very closely. And a lot of them we already are. And then there's some that will come. So, yeah, I would say, yeah, financially, team size, these other bits and pieces, I do have, targets for year one.
Cool. Love it. And I'm sure if you worked at an agency, you had KPIs, but have you brought any in internally? Because, I mean, they're self-imposed, right? Like you're obviously a good recruiter. You're obviously very good at billing. Heard some of your numbers, and, you know, you don't do that by fluke. You know, there's a work ethic there, and I think companies try to, you know, encapsulate those into KPIs. And what KPIs, I suppose, have you brought into the new business, and what have you left behind?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I was actually lucky enough to be in a platform, you know, for 7 years where they were very soft KPIs, and virtually no KPIs if you were consistently billing. And what I've brought into this organisation is that there are no hard KPIs, and that I'm not being a hawk in terms of call numbers, you know, CVs out. But we're early on, right? And it's placing trust. What I look for is, you know, day-to-day productivity. You know, how many good CVs we're running with, and, you know, how many interviews we're getting on the board. And at the moment, because the team is having success across those metrics, if you want to call them that, I haven't yet brought in harder KPIs, but we'll see.
All right. Look, we'll wrap it up in a minute because we do like to keep these episodes short. This has been gold. It's been absolute gold. But last bit of advice you would give someone who might be looking to go out on their own. Is there anything that comes to mind when you think, if someone were to come up to you and go, hey, I'm thinking of going on my own, what's the first sort of thing that comes to mind in terms of good, bad, warning, support?
Yeah, I think for me, it was something that I thought about for a long time. And as with every other decision that I make, it had to be the right time for my family. And for me, in terms of my confidence within this space, I think that for me it was important to do it when, my wife and I were ready in terms of the kids' ages, daycare, kindy, school, all of those considerations. And when our youngest turned 1 last year, that was a good time to then do this. But if you don't have kids, obviously that's not a consideration. If you're good at what you do and you're good at billing, I think that there's nothing really holding you back. What I would say is don't do it too early. Don't think that, you have one good quarter and you're going to be great and it's going to be smooth sailing. I think that what I've found is it's really important having a brand in the market as it relates to the clients that you want to work with. And if you don't, there can be pushback, and so it can be more difficult than you think to actually sign terms. And yeah, so look, I think it's a balance. Don't be afraid that you can't do it. At the same time, just think about, okay, when am I ready? If you're billing and sort of the day-to-day 360 life is something that is second nature and you enjoy sort of managing a team and you've got a great client base that you're confident will, want to work with you as an individual, why not?
I love it. Matt, pleasure.
Thank you, mate.
Thanks for jumping on. So we have time for you today. If you got anything out of today's episode, like, share, subscribe, helps us grow. As always, have an amazing day. May all your deals come true.